Hello, everyone, and welcome to week 2 of Philosophy 100 this fall. I hope that you had a nice weekend and that, your first week went off without too many issues or hassles. Today, I'm going to start talking about abortion, our second topic in sort of our section on applied ethics. And then we'll begin talking probably by the end of this week or next week about more general ethical theories. I'm going to try something slightly different this week than that I did with the lecture last week. I'm going to try, we'll sort of see how it goes, to split the lectures up into shorter bits. So there won't just be one long lecture video posted to the Canvas page. There's going to be a few shorter videos kind of string together and hopefully each one picks up right where the last one left off, but that way you don't have to watch all of them all at once, but you'll know sort of where starting and stopping points are. All right, so let's go ahead and begin. All right, so first things first. So here's my terrible pro-life meme. There are abortion memes out there. I don't think it's necessarily a great thing to be joking about, but it's something that when things are absurd, humor is worth thinking about or turning to. All right, so if you haven't as of yet, I want you to pause this lecture right now and go onto the Canvas page and watch this Vox video. Similarly, if you haven't yet, pause this lecture right now and go to the Canvas page and take both the opinion poll and do the little short writing assignment on your position with regards to abortion, where you're trying to answer the question whether or not it's ever permissible to have an abortion or for an abortion to occur, and give your justification for why you think that. So go ahead and do that now. Pause, go do it, and then we'll move on. Cool. All right, so hopefully you're back now from watching that video. Abortion is a really tricky issue, and it's part of the reason I wanted to start with it here in this class. Besides, so we talked about racism and sexism last time, and abortion this time. I'm starting off with these sort of hot topics where there's emotionally charged and generally tricky to talk with people about, because I want to sort of dig into the issues and sort of talk about how we can get to a place where we can think about these things in a less emotionally charged way and think about the actual issues sort of at the core, the philosophical issues at the core of each of these subjects. Abortion itself is a really tricky issue because people disagree on all sides, right? There's like no real agreement, even between me and you guys, between me and my friends, like people with respect to the details, people just don't agree about what counts as an acceptable case, an unacceptable case, whether or not it's right all the time or wrong all the time, whether or not it should be legal or whether or not it shouldn't be legal. So we gotta worry about all these things, and it's worth talking about. It's an emotionally difficult thing to discuss, given people's commitments and strong feelings. So if this lecture makes you feel icky or like you have strong feelings about things, feel free to pause it and try to think through those feelings, what you're feeling. But I do hope that you sort of press on and try to critically assess your own thoughts about these issues. That's why I wanted you to have the position paper sort of written out, where I want you to have something along the lines of a thought about whether or not you think abortion is wrong in any case, in every case, basically. And then if you think it's permissible in some cases, why? Like, what makes it permissible? And if you think it's not ever permissible, why? What makes it impermissible? Just to get that out there, there's those are a couple of terms. Permissible means, morally okay to do. Impermissible means morally not okay to do. Abortion is also theoretically rather tricky. It's theoretically tricky because there's a lot of different moving parts. There's moral issues and there's deep metaphysical issues that are kind of at the core of abortion, of the debate. So what metaphysical issues are at issue? Well, it's the metaphysics of persons. That is the metaphysics of what it is for something to be or count as a person. So one thing that's worth getting on the table here early on is when we're talking about fetuses, nobody disputes that a fetus isn't human, right? I mean, there are non-human fetuses, namely animal fetuses, but nobody says that a fetus isn't a human, right? They are biologically human. Everybody accepts that fetuses, human fetuses are human fetuses, right? But what people do dispute is whether or not fetuses are or are ever human persons, right? So a fetus is clearly a human, and it's like a separate individual organism, even though it's in some way dependent for its continued existence on the body of the mother. And insofar as it's a separate organism, I mean, as a separate organism goes, it has its own bodily unity. It has its own genetic makeup. At a certain point, it can exist outside of the womb, right? But up to that point, it can't. But the question then is, are fetuses persons? That's really what is going to sort of matter here for the metaphysics of the debate. And then what is it for something to be a person? When does one become a person? What is it about being a person that matters? And then maybe something along the lines of the debate about like what it is for something to potentially become a person, right? So here's one thing like it's worth thinking about. You, at one point in your life history, were a fetus. You were a fetus. Before you became you, right? What you are now, a human person that's, hopefully thriving in this in this quarantine period of the virus during 2020. You currently, if we trace back your origins, at one point you were a fetus. Now, were you a person then? Maybe not. I mean, sometimes things develop. So things go from one state into another state. Acorns are not oak trees, right? You started off as something different than you are now, and you've changed in certain ways, but interesting question, when you were a fetus, were you a person? That's part of the puzzle. This acorns and are not oak trees thing is, I think, an interesting point, right? Nobody thinks an acorn is an oak tree, even though when you take an acorn and put it in the right situation, it will become an oak tree, right? Same thing is the general thought for a fetus. A fetus is definitely not an adult human, right? But giving it the right conditions, it will become an adult human. Adult humans are clearly persons. So then the question is, does that apply also all the way back to fetuses? All right, let's start with a central argument that's sort of often trotted out by people that are pro-life. A basic argument against abortion. Premise one. So let's sort of back this up just a little bit. In philosophy, we give arguments for conclusions, and sometimes, or we argue against arguments for conclusions. Generally, what happens is somebody has a position that they want to defend, and that is going to be the conclusion of their argument. And they're going to offer support for that conclusion by way of premises in an argument that support the conclusion. So arguments are series of statements where One of the statements is the conclusion, and the other statements are the premises that are meant to support the conclusion. That's sort of argument lingo 101. Here we've got a basic argument against the morality of abortion. It's the first three are premises, the fourth is the conclusion. You can sort of usually tell when you've got a conclusion, when you've got the word therefore or so in front of it. So here we go. Premise 1, a fetus is a person. Premise 2, it is wrong to kill a person. Premise 3, aborting a fetus is to kill it. Conclusion, therefore, it is wrong to abort a fetus. So now take a minute and think about this argument and think about what it would take to argue against this argument. So one thing that we try to do in philosophy is make our arguments set up in such a way that if you accept the premises, if the premises are true, then the conclusion follows from the premises. Now, what does that mean? Well, if the premises are true and the conclusion follows from the premises, that means that if you disagree with the conclusion, you can't just accept all of the premises and say, no, I don't like that conclusion, that's false. If it's set up in such a way that the premises actually guarantee the conclusion, that the conclusion follows from the premises, then if you dislike the answer or the conclusion, in order to reject the conclusion, you have to find a premise to reject. You have to find a premise that you can say, I don't like this conclusion, and here's the premise that's the faulty premise. This premise is false, and that's why I can reject this conclusion. So here, with this argument, you need to find a premise to reject if you disagree with the conclusion. All right, so what might we do here? Is this a good argument? A good argument would be one where all of the premises are true and the conclusion follows from the premises. And then we would be like, okay, great. We accept the argument and its conclusion. Here, though, I don't think this is a very good argument. It seems a little bit problematic. It seems like a bad argument. How is it a bad argument? Well, premise 1 is really controversial, to say the least, right? So let me go back. Premise 1, a fetus is a person. Premise 1 is really controversial. Not everyone buys that a fetus is a person. I don't know what I think about whether or not a fetus counts as a person. Personally, I'm of the mind that early on in the gestation period, a fetus is definitely not a person. But later on in the gestation period, like third trimester, maybe it is. A very difficult question, to say the least. We have science and metaphysics working on the question of whether or not a fetus is a person. It's a very deep and difficult question to answer. Premise 2, however, is also highly problematic. So suppose you want to accept this premise 1 of this argument. You're like, yeah, okay, I do think a fetus is a person, but you still dislike the conclusion. You don't want to buy the conclusion. How else might you deny the argument? You might deny premise 2. You'd say, actually, you know what? It's not always wrong to kill a person. Premise 2 is problematic. It supposes that all persons have an inalienable right to life. Some people might think that that's true, but it's not exactly true. Premise 2, as it stands, is unqualified. That is, it doesn't have any sort of caveats or any cases that could slip under the radar here. And it's being unqualified. It's far too general to be correct. I mean, is it always impermissible to violate someone's right to life? If so, then you literally it would not be permissible for you to kill someone to punish them. That is, capital punishment. That's controversial. Some people think it's very wrong to kill someone in punishment. But it would also not be possible. Like if it were wrong to deprive someone of their right to life, then self-defense wouldn't be permissible either. The person, if you kill someone in self-defense, you would be doing something wrong, even if they were trying to kill you, right? They were doing something wrong to you, but if you killed them back, in defense, if they have an inalienable right to life, then self-defense is wrong. Similarly, war. I think war is also a controversial topic, but if a country is trying to destroy your country and take over, and they're going to do it by force, it would seem that you could, legitimately defend yourself in a wartime scenario, and that might involve killing people. Question: is it always wrong? I mean, some people do take this position seriously and think that it is always wrong to kill anyone ever. But it seems that that's a pretty strong thing to claim. You might deny that it's always wrong. That there are some, you might say that there are some cases when it's okay, but not all cases, right? There's so you might think about maybe changing the premise 2 a little bit. And I mean, so basically, someone that's pro life could change premise 2 a little bit and still have a good argument, right? So you might think, well, no one really has a right not to be killed in any case, but they do have a right to not being killed unjustly. That is, like, maybe if a society is being just in punishing someone by putting them to death, that would be a way of being killed rightly, morally, in a morally right way, or someone being killed in self-defense. That's not an unjust form of killing. I have the parenthetical freedom example thing. So some, you might think that people have an inalienable right to being free, and that is, I mean, if it's unqualified, that's a little bit too broad, right? I mean, clearly, people don't, if someone has broken a law and threatened somebody else's life, or say something, then their freedom can be restricted. That is, what we do when we put people in jail. We restrict their freedoms. All right, so maybe it's you don't have the right to not being killed unjustly. So maybe we can replace premise 2 here with a better premise. It's wrong to kill a person in normal circumstances, where normal circumstances are circumstances where no one has threatened to attempt or attempted to harm or kill anyone else, right? In those sort of situations, maybe it'd be, the argument maybe still goes through. It's harder to deny this premise than it is to deny, remember, premise 2 as it is here, that it's wrong to kill a person. The idea here is that it's wrong to kill a person in normal circumstances. All right. So what about premise 1, though? Oops. Oh, nope, sorry. So issue, though, okay, so normal circumstances, we've got, is it wrong? It's wrong to kill a person in normal circumstances. But what about a case where a mother's life is threatened? Right, where normal circumstances we have defined as no one has threatened or attempted to harm or kill anyone else. But what about a case where a mother's life is threatened and an abortion is the only way to, in a sense, save that life? Well, in that case, are we also going to have to reject premise 2 here? Well, there's a couple of different opinions that people have in this kind of case. Abortion, some people think, yeah, okay, abortion is permissible in this kind of case because, if the mother's life is being threatened, we can't play, dice with lives, or one life for the other. In this case, carrying the fetus to term, maybe the mother would die before then. Who knows, right? It could be lots of different issues. So it seems, at the very least, in this case, that maybe the abortion is permissible if the mother's life is threatened. But other people might think something more like this: abortion is still wrong in those cases, because persons can only lose their life if they intentionally threaten or attempt to harm or kill, right? And so, and the fetus is not intentionally threatening or attempting to harm or kill the mother. And so maybe it is the case that it's still wrong in this case to perform an abortion in killing the fetus. This is a very strong position that some people take, that even in cases where the mother's life is on the line, it's wrong. It's going to be wrong to abort the fetus, and all things being equal, we shouldn't do it. We should hope for the best or something like that. But I mean, cases of this sort seem to, at the very least, I think, fall out of normal circumstances. Another way we could sort of think about this is that really we should just go back to our definition of normal circumstances and change this to include cases where anyone's life is threatened at all by the way that things are going on. So it's wrong to kill a person in normal circumstances where, in the case in which a mother's life is threatened, even if it's not intentionally threatened, seems to fall out of normal circumstances. And so we could still reject premise 2 on that basis, because it would be okay to perform an abortion when circumstances are sufficiently complicated. All right, well, let's go back and think, though, maybe we should try to reject premise 1. Remember, premise 1 is the thought that a fetus is a person. Oftentimes, I think people will accept premise 2 of some sort. I mean, premise 2 seems pretty spot on, right? It is wrong in normal circumstances to kill a person, right? Most people don't want to reject that, right? Most people think, yes, killing a person is wrong for the most part in most normal circumstances. But maybe somebody that denies the argument, somebody that's pro-choice, wants to deny premise 1 and say, no, look, it's okay to abort a fetus because a fetus just isn't a person. But these kind of arguments are the arguments that get given for premise 1 tend to be really tricky arguments. They're called slippery slope arguments, and they go both ways. I'm going to walk you through a couple going both directions, and so we can sort of see how tricky these arguments are. So take this position from a pro-life position. Pro-lifer thinks, look, clearly a newborn baby is a person, right? A newborn baby is a person. It's wrong to kill newborn babies. They think, okay, if you've got a newborn baby, there's no morally relevant difference between a newborn baby that is outside of the womb and a baby that is about ready to be born but is still inside the womb, right? There's no morally relevant difference between the baby inside and outside of a woman's belly, right? That's just, if it's wrong to kill a newborn baby, then it's wrong to kill a baby that is inside of a woman's belly right before it's being born, right? And that seems pretty clear. That seems clear as day. Now, here comes the rub, right? There is no morally relevant difference between a baby that's about to be born and a baby that's a day out from being born, right? Okay, so now we've got, so first we had a baby that's out of the womb, then we had a baby that's in the womb, no morally relevant difference there. Now the idea is, okay, we take the baby that's in the womb that's just about just being born to a baby that's a day before being born. Well, it seems like, if it's wrong to kill the baby that's just about to be born, then it's wrong to kill the baby that's a day away from being born. There's no morally relevant difference between a baby that's 1 day older, 1 day younger here. And we go on, right? So from 1 day, we go to 2 days, and from 2 days, we go to 3 days, and from 3 days, we go to a week, and from a week, we go to a month, and then we go all the way back to, there is no morally relevant difference between a fetus that has only developed for 1 day and a newly implanted zygote, right? Which is the sort of initial stage of pregnancy, is when you've got the zygote, the egg and the sperm fused, and then it actually successfully implants into the uterus. So the idea of the argument here is we've got a slippery slope from a newborn baby as a person, and clearly it's wrong to kill a newborn baby, to there's no morally relevant difference to a newborn outside the womb to inside the womb, and then no morally relevant difference from that one to the day before, to the day before, to the day before, to the month before, to the month before, to the, newly implanted zygote. No morally relevant difference. Well, if there is no morally relevant difference, then if it's wrong to kill a newborn baby, then it's wrong to kill a newly implanted zygote. That's the kind of argument that we get here. Other side of the argument. Abortion is okay because. Now here's, so now we've got the pro-choice version of the exact same argument, just think of it in the reverse. Clearly, a newly implanted zygote is not a person. It is a clump of 4 cells. Basically, we've got, the egg and the sperm come together, and then it creates a new thing, and it starts to multiply, and it basically starts off as 4 cells, and then, those cells split and they double, and then it gets bigger and it gets bigger, right? So clearly a zygote is not a person. And the idea is, well, okay, if a zygote is just a clump of cells is, can be killed without it being a real issue, right? Like I've got cells on my arm. I scratch my arm. I've just killed a bunch of cells on my arm. Nobody is worried about the killing of amoebas. Amoebas are single-celled organisms, right? Like we don't have any control over that. Like every time you drink water, you're probably getting an amoeba of some sort into your system, or every time you take a breath, you're getting certain kinds of bacteria, yeast live in the air, single-celled organisms that you're ingesting them and they're dying. Nobody's worried about those. Clearly a zygote, really small multi-celled human organism, is not a person. There is no relevant moral difference between a clump of 4 human cells and a clump of 8. That is a zygote that is, 4 cells, and a clump of a zygote that is 8 cells. And once again, we have the bigger one, the argument sort of rolls out, right? From 4 to 8, from 8 to 16, from 16 to 32, all on down. There's no morally relevant difference between that one to that one. All the way to, there's no morally relevant difference between a zygote and a developed fetus of a certain size. Therefore, maybe it's okay to have an abortion of a fetus. Now, morally relevant difference. Some people will deny this argument and say at a certain point, oh, there is a morally relevant difference, particularly like the point at which the fetus can survive on its own outside of the womb. That might be a morally relevant difference. And so maybe, up to that point, there's no morally relevant difference and abortion is okay, but after that point, it's not okay. That's the kind of thing, that's the kind of way you get out of one of these arguments. But the idea here is, and sort of the issue is, there are these slippery slope arguments on both sides. And both seem rather plausible, right? The first premise of the first argument, that a newborn baby is a person, that seems pretty acceptable. And a lot of these other sort of intermediate premises seem acceptable, that if there's no morally relevant difference between one of this size and one of this size, or one of this age and one of this age, then there's no morally relevant difference between one of this age and one slightly sooner. But also this other argument, right? Clearly a zygote isn't a person, it's just a clump of cells. And it doesn't seem morally relevant that it's, twice as big every few days, because it's just a clump of cells that keep multiplying. So it seems maybe if it's acceptable to kill the zygote, then it's acceptable to kill one that's slightly bigger. Now, okay, so that would be rejecting premise 1 if you took this kind of slippery slope argument that said a fetus is not a person. And you can do that. You can do that, and that is an acceptable position to hold in this debate. The thing is, if you're pro-choice and you accept that a fetus is not a person, you're gonna have a really hard time arguing with people that are pro-life, and same for pro-lifers. If you're a pro-lifer and you think that a fetus is a person, you're gonna have a really hard time arguing with people that are pro-choice and accept that and say that a fetus isn't a person. These are the issues here are deep metaphysical issues. It's really hard to say whether or not a clump of cells is a person or not, even though a clump of cells clearly comes to be a person after a certain amount of time. Nobody thinks that an acorn is an oak tree, but an acorn, when sufficiently watered and planted in the right way, will become an oak tree. Nobody denies that. So, something like an analogy is going on here. Thompson, finally, to our article. Thompson sees this metaphysical quandary and wants to sidestep it completely. She's just going to avoid the issue for the sake of argument. In her article, she just doesn't want to talk about whether or not a fetus is a person. And so in order to make her argument, she's just going to assume that a fetus is a person. Because her thought is, if she can make the argument that sometimes abortions are okay, even if the fetus is a person, then her argument is stronger in a certain sense. And it doesn't really matter in the end whether or not the fetus is a person. If the fetus isn't a person, her argument still stands. If the fetus is a person, as long as she's shown that it's permissible in some cases to have an abortion, then even given that the fetus is a person, her argument is going to be solid. So that's where we are now. All right, so I'm going to end this here and start the next section in a second. What I want you to do now is to go onto the Canvas page and watch this thought experiment violinist video. Hopefully you've read the violinist bit from Thompson, and there you go.